Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some players that are currently under 10% owned that I think could be good picks for game week 1. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, as I said in the intro, the aim of today's video is to take a look at some of the players that are currently under 10% owned that I think could be pretty good picks for game week 1. I do want to note two things before we start today. The first is, if a player is under 10% owned, they are probably lacking something, right? Because if a player is a good price, playing for a good team with good data and good fixtures and they're nailed on, they will not be under 10% owned, right? It would be impossible because people would pick up on them as a fantastic asset. So inherently, by being a differential, these players are going to be lacking in some departments. So before you say a lot of these players aren't great picks, or why are you suggesting this player, they've not got great minutes or they've not got great fixtures, they have to inherently lack something in them for them to be below 10%. There are a couple, though, that I think are lacking far less than potentially some other people think. And that's the purpose of the video, is to try and highlight if there are some players that do have lower ownership than I think they should have. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which sounds very contradictory to the whole point of the video, is that I wouldn't ever pick a player just because they have low ownership. So one of the big mistakes that I see a lot of new managers, and sometimes veteran managers, make, is picking a player just because they're 2% owned. Realistically, the aim of the game is to get the most points possible. The aim of the game is not to get the most points possible from the lowest owned assets. Obviously, that will help you to win FPL and to win your leagues if other people don't own those players. But really, you should be picking the players that you think will get the most points. So I would ignore ownership up until you get to a place where you are choosing maybe between 3 or 4 options, then maybe consider their ownership. So let's say you're looking at 4.5 million defenders. You're not sure which one to go for. You think they're equally good, but 3 of them are above, let's say you look, I don't know, Wan-Bissaka, Konsa, and Dorgu. If you really think that all 3 of them are very similar, go for Dorgu because he's lower owned. I don't mind in that case, but I would never select a player just because of that low ownership. Hopefully that distinction makes sense, but I think it's important not to get into that trap of trying to fill your squad with 7 or 8 differentials, because it's honestly not important. As long as you have 1 or 2 players that are slightly different, and as long as you pick the better players, that is a differential in and of itself. So yeah, let's jump into today's video then, with those 2 bits of context in place. So we're going to look at defenders, then midfielders, then forwards. There will be players that I've not selected here, so please let me know if you think there's someone I've missed. But I've just tried to select the ones that I genuinely am even considering in my team. I've tried not to put too many people in this video that I wouldn't even consider for my team. So, what have we got in these tables? We've obviously got the name of the player, price, TSB is basically their ownership. So all of the players in this video today are under 10% owned. I've then got their non-penalty expected goals per 90, which is their goal threat per 90. Their expected assist per 90, which is their creative threat. And then I've got DEFCON points total for defenders and midfielders. So this is, according to the data from last season, how many defensive contribution points would they have picked up? And then I've got their fixture difficulty ranking according to Fantasy Football Hub. I'm getting tons of questions at the moment. Where can I find defensive contribution data for last season? So there will be a link down below to Fantasy Football Hub. If you go to their Opta stats section, which is this here, you can sort where it says DC. This is defensive contribution points. And if you're on last season, you can work out who would have got the most. So I've just filtered this by defensive contribution. You can see, obviously, we know that Tarkowski was top, then Caicedo, then Bednarek, then Murillo. So you've got the full list of DC. If you wanted to maybe just sort it by midfielders that had the highest DC, you can then see it's Caicedo, Garner, Anderson, Gomez, Norgard, etc. You can also sort per 90 if you want, if you think players' minutes might go up. Or let's say you just want to search for specific players. So let's say you want to look at Bruno Fernandes, for example. 22, by the way, DEFCON points last season. Bruno G would have got 16. Oh, will Declan Rice be good for DEFCON points this season? He would have picked up 18 last season. So I find this super useful. You can then even filter home and away, by the way, so you can work out if players are getting more DEFCON points at home or away. I spend my entire life pretty much on Opta statistics over on Fantasy Football Hub. So if you want to get into data a little bit more, there will be a link down below. You can get some of it for free, by the way. I think DEFCON might be in under the paid subscription, though. So check it out. If you do want to get access, there'll be a link down below to get 50% off. And also in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about fixtures and the fixture analyzer. You can sort this as well according to whatever game week range you want. You can look at attack, defense, clean sheets, and sort out who has the difficult fixtures. You can then even hide game weeks, by the way. So if you want to hide game week 2 or hide game week 3, you can include and exclude. So get rid of 2, get rid of 4. How does that change the fixture difficulty? If you're looking at fixture rotations, that's really useful. There is obviously so much more than just that. You've got points projections for all of the players too. I highly recommend checking it out, but everything that we've used to help in today's video has come from Fantasy Football Hub, so use those links down below. So, back to the point of it, let's look at the best defenders currently under 10% ownership. I think arguably the most underrated assets in the game right now are coming from Crystal Palace. I know the opening 3 fixtures aren't perfect, but they're also not as bad, I think, as some people are suggesting. And players like Munoz and Sarr and Eze and Mateta, they're so good. We saw this last season. I think Munoz might be the most underrated Crystal Palace asset of them all, though. Like, when you look at what do you need from a defender? Playing for a decent defence. Yes, Palace were a decent defence last season. Attacking threat for days, absolutely. Really, really good, by the way, for DEFCON for a fullback. Like, 14's not bad at all. There are a lot of fullbacks that have less than that. And he's so nailed on as well. He's always getting 90 minutes. So when we're looking at per 90 data, Munoz is actually going to get that sort of data on a regular basis. What this means then is Munoz is up at 0.24 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90. That means if he plays 90 minutes, he's getting you an attacking return every 4 games, which is really, really good for a defender. So yeah, if you can look past the fixtures, if you're happy playing him in Game Week 1 against Chelsea, the thing is with Munoz, I just don't know that Munoz is the sort of player that you bench regularly. So I think if you're not happy playing him in the difficult fixtures, at his price, I just don't think you can go for him. But I really like him. And of course, I am a Man United fan, and this is incredibly biased, but I have to talk about Dorgu because I think he looks like the most promising cheap defender this season in terms of attacking threat, along with Juve, who we'll discuss. But his data was really solid last season. He's looked so good in pre-season. The only question mark around Dorgu, there's 2 of them. Firstly, Man United defence. We will continue to concede lots of goals unless we suddenly go out there and sign a really good defensive midfielder, which looks unlikely. So clean sheets aren't particularly great. And secondly, is his end product going to improve? Because in pre-season, the man has been popping up in the box left, right and centre, but he's not been delivering the attacking return. So question marks over Dorgu, but I like him. You've got Tarkowski and Murillo, and by the way, I've just noticed that Williams is 5.5. We're just going to leave that. Williams is obviously 5 million, but you've got Tarkowski and Murillo at 5.5. Both of these are absolute DEFCON monsters. So these are the 2 best defenders in the game for defensive contributions last season. Now, it is an important note, by the way, that we don't know that what happened last season will happen again. It could be that this season, Milenkovic is higher than Murillo, but last season, Murillo was so good for baseline bonus, so good for DEFCON, and same for Tarkowski as well. So if you are choosing defenders that are going to get you probably quite a few defensive contribution points, Tarkowski and Murillo are those guys, but look at their attacking threat. It was pretty much non-existent last season, so you have to balance that out. I really like Nico Williams at 5 million, just because he's a cheaper route into the Forest defence. You can see last season, by the way, 18 DEFCON points. Nico Williams was one of the better fullbacks in the Premier League for defensive contributions. So if you want to go for an attacking or a more attacking sort of fullback and you don't want to go for the centre-backs, but you want the chance of defensive contribution, Nico Williams is that guy because of the way Nottingham Forest defend. I think Forest have had like 4 clean sheets in 6 in pre-season. They're going to continue to sit back, park the bus. So I think a Nottingham Forest defender, I wouldn't say is essential by any means, but look at what Fantasy Football Hub say. They've got the best fixtures over the first 6 defensively. So I think putting everything together, it does make sense to have a Forest defender. But then when I also think I probably expect a drop-off from Forest this season, it seems crazy to spend 5.5 for me. So I keep coming back to Nico Williams as the one to go for at 5 million. He's been in pretty much, I don't know, like 80% of my drafts, Nico Williams. You've then got a couple more options at 4.5, Juve and Anderson. I would say Juve and Dorgu are the 2 high upside, high ceiling, really want to attack kind of 4.5s. So if you're sitting there right now saying, I want to have fun with FPL, I want to try and win FPL, I want to go for that player that could break the game, that could get so many attacking returns. Dorgu and Juve, due to just where they're playing, they're both playing essentially like left wingers. And whenever you get that, it's worth potentially going for the upside. But again, Juve and Dorgu don't play for good defences. The fixtures are a bit of a mixed bag early on. But I like the pair of them. Like the idea of having Juve and Dorgu in my team, that excites me overall. Then Anderson's pretty good for DEFCON. 26 defensive contribution points he would have achieved last season, only 4.5 million. He rotates quite nicely in with some teams, right? For example, he plays, I think, Leeds at home in Game Week 4. There are quite a few teams that have a difficult fixture in Game Week 4. So Anderson, if you can get the right rotation, I like him. And then just to finish up with Lacroix, I love Munoz, right? And I think Munoz is probably worth it for the upside. But when you look at baseline bonus, and when you look at defensive contribution, Lacroix at 5 million could be the one. 34 defensive contribution points last season he would have got. That's just behind Murillo and Tarkowski, but he's at that cheaper price of 5. Then when you also consider, last season the man had 0.1 non-penalty expected goals. That is the 3rd best on this list after Juve and Munoz. So Lacroix's not a player that doesn't get on the under set pieces and can't score goals either. He's very, very good in terms of fitness and availability. I would go as far as saying he might be the most underrated defender on this list, Lacroix, because he's down at 1% ownership. So yeah, I think, honestly, every single person on this list, yeah, absolutely, every single one on this list has been in one of my drafts in the last week. I've considered absolutely all of them. So I'd find it difficult to say who I think is the most underrated, who I like the most. But I would say Dorgu and Juve if you're chasing the upside at that cheaper price. I would say definitely look at a Nottingham Forest defender, just simply because of the way that they set up under Nuno. And then, yeah, keep an eye out for Lacroix and Munoz. Not the best opening fixtures, but each of them are fantastic picks in their own right. So moving on to the midfield, and I would say this is where there are the most differential options. Like defenders and forwards, I basically had about 7 or 8 for each anyway that I really wanted to discuss. Midfielders, I could have probably got a list of about 15 to 20 together, but here are 8 of my favourites. So for those on audio, I've got Matoma, Enzo, Anderson, Gakpo, Tielemans, Sarr, Wilson, and Arias. These are the 8 that I've selected to talk about. We'll start with Matoma at 5.8%. Matoma is a player that I have been looking at. I think Brighton's opening fixtures, again, aren't as bad as people are suggesting. I know Fantasy Football Hub had them as 20th. I honestly do disagree on that element. I think some of them, depending how you see certain teams starting the season, but Fulham and Everton in the opening too. I do expect Fulham and Everton to be sort of mid-table teams, but they aren't fixtures where I'm like, I don't expect Brighton to score. And he's probably one of the more nailed-on attackers for Brighton. The only thing is, he was prone to quite a few early subs last season, so I don't see any issues with his starts. Like, if you look at Brighton's attacking options, they've got quite a few players that can play the 10. They've got a decent number that can play on the right. They've not got tons of left wingers. So I think Matoma's start should be pretty secure. It's just whether he gets close to 90 minutes. And his underlying data last season was just, I'd say, solid. Wasn't terrible, wasn't fantastic. And his DEFCON points total was 0. So I like Matoma, but he's not like a game breaker. And then when I consider he's 6.5 million... maybe Njai, Kudus, and again, as I'll discuss in a second, maybe someone like an Ismail Assar might be a slightly better pick. I love Enzo Fernandez, by the way. I'm one of the only people that actually enjoyed owning Enzo Fernandez in FPL last season. There was a period of like 12 game weeks where across that entire 12 game weeks, he outscored Cole Palmer. He was pretty consistent for attacking returns. The only concern for me is I don't expect him to play a more advanced role too often this season. When you consider the amount of attacking talent they have, I could see him playing that deeper role a little bit more often. Although if Reece James starts to push into midfield alongside Caicedo, maybe Enzo is unleashed in that number 10 role. I also am surprised that his DEFCON points total was so low. It was only 6 last season. When you watch Enzo Fernandez, he's very busy. He's like Bruno Fernandes, right? He's very involved in there. As a result, you'd expect him to maybe pick up more defensive contribution points. So that's a little disappointing. I think he's solid. I really haven't had him in too many of my drafts, though. Anderson does appear to still be the standout 5.5. So I know people will be like, Anderson's not a differential. Everyone's got him. He's 3.8% owned. And with Forest having such fantastic opening fixtures, he picked up 36 defensive contribution points last season. So if he can get anywhere close to that and maybe add a couple more assists, a couple more goals in there, we could be looking at a really good season. The only concern is really low goal threat, pretty low assist threat. So from open play, Anderson's not giving you too much in terms of goal threat and creativity. I've got to discuss Cody Gakpo. If we're looking at players that could absolutely pop off, do you remember Luis Diaz last season for Liverpool at the start of the season? Those opening 5 weeks, did he have 50 points? I think he was averaging 10 points a week for the opening 5. You could absolutely see Gakpo in the opening 5 weeks achieving 50 points. Because Liverpool are a team that just score so many goals and they create so many chances. Gakpo's looked brilliant in pre-season. In the most recent game, I think he scored a brace and scored an own goal. Right? He's had a pretty eventful pre-season. And with Luis Diaz being off, I just think Gakpo's minutes on that left look pretty good. There were some concerns that Florian Wirtz might play out on the left. And as much as he drifts into the left pockets, it does very much look like Wirtz will be preferred as you could call it a number 10 or a second striker, but supporting in behind the number 9. We also know that Gakpo can play as the 9 as well, right? So don't rule that out as an option. But I just think his minutes should be a bit better this season. His underlying data when he plays is pretty decent. I would expect Gakpo to have a fine start to the season. Am I going to pick Gakpo? He's a very tricky price point at 7.5. Like when you consider what we're trying to squeeze into our teams, like Watkins, Palmer, Salah, Virgil van Dijk in defence. Maybe you want a Murillo in there. Maybe you want a bench boost. Also squeezing in a 7.5 midfielder is very, very difficult to do in your teams. So he's not been in many of my drafts, but I'm certainly at least considering him. And again, if you're a Liverpool fan or you just want a high upside player that can score goals, Gakpo is a decent shout. Now, I had Marlon in the table until obviously, so I'm recording this on Wednesday morning. So Tuesday night, I put the graphics together. I put Marlon in there. But as of Tuesday evening, we did get an announcement. It looks like Aston Villa are signing Evan Gessend. I don't know if I'm butchering that name. I'll be honest, I watch very little of the League and did a little bit of research into where he's played. He can play left wing, striker, or as a right winger. So this man can play anywhere across the front three, but he played a lot of his minutes last season for Nice on the right. So we're basically looking at someone that can play as a striker or as a right winger. Who does that sound like to you? That sounds like Daniel Marlon. So as much as Marlon might still be first choice in that terms of the player that can play on the right, it obviously massively reduces these minutes because now we know that Gessend could start. It also means that if Watkins were to leave or to be rotated, Gessend may still be first choice ahead of Marlon as the striker. So I already felt a little uncomfortable about Marlon, but with the signing of Gessend, which, by the way, has had the here we go from Fabrizio, but hasn't been officially confirmed, it does make me think now that Marlon might be too much of a risk. So I'm just looking at his stats here, Gessend. And again, apologies if I'm butchering the name. 33 matches last season, 12 goals, 8 assists. So this is a man that is by the way, potentially going to be an FPL option for us at some point, depending what his price is and whether he's a midfielder or a forward. But at the moment, that probably does enough for me to just put me off Marlon. So what I did is I simply just put Tielemans in there. If you can't afford Morgan Rogers and you want to go a bit more differential, but you still want a Villa player, Tielemans could be on penalties, take some set pieces, has decent open play creativity with 0.18 XA per 90. And as you can see here, he would have picked up 18 DEFCON points last season. That's not outstanding, but it's an extra 20 points nonetheless. So yeah, I don't know that I would have Tielemans ahead of Anderson or someone. Even Ismail Assar, you can stretch there as we'll discuss. But I still think that he will offer decent value at 6 million if you want a route into that Villa team. Ismail Assar just has to be the standout here. I'm a data-driven manager. I like data. I am also an eye test and vibes guy as well. Lots of people say, Ross, you talk about being a data-driven manager and then you play based on vibes. I combine everything, right? But it's difficult to look past that data for Sarr. So Sarr has comfortably on this list the best non-penalty XGI. He's got 0.36 non-penalty XG, 0.23 expected assists per 90. So combining that, we're looking at a guy that's got almost 0.6 non-penalty expected goal involvement. If you look at XGI totals across the entirety of last season, Ismail Assar was so high. Do you know what? We can even jump over and I can show you that right now. So if you go onto Opta stats and then sort by, even if we go not non-penalties, just sort by XGI, right? And remember that all of these players up here, apart from Wissa, would have had penalties. So Salah, Palmer, Haaland, Isak, Mbeumo, Wissa, Fernandes, then Sarr's there. If we sort by just midfielders, total XGI last season, Sarr is 5th behind Salah, Palmer, Mbeumo, Fernandes, and then Ismail Assar. And again, all of those had penalties as well. So when we talk about open play, goal threat, and creativity, like Sarr is really, really decent, and he's only 6'5". Now, if you owned Eze rather than Sarr last season, you would have been very, very happy, especially over that period where a lot of people went Sarr. And I understand that Sarr is not a particularly good finisher, and he misses a lot of his chances. But a man that is putting up that data is a seriously, seriously good option. So he's probably, arguably in this entire video, the most underrated player is Ismail Assar. He's only 2.2%. So someone to consider. I've looked at ways to get him in. It's the fact that he clashes with a lot of our players. Like in Game Week 1, he plays Chelsea and clashes with Sanchez. I think in Game Week 2, it is he plays against Nottingham Forest, so he clash with your Forest defender. So there is a little bit of clashing going on. But if you just look at him as an asset in and of himself, he's fantastic. Harry Wilson has been scoring goals for fun in pre-season. I'm still a little bit cautious about his minutes and also just about how much he can maintain that in the Premier League as well. We've seen little flashes here and there. He was fantastic off the bench at points last season, but it's like, does he get enough minutes to justify having him as a pick ahead of someone like an Anderson? I'm not sure at the moment. He's not been in too many of my drafts, but if we're going based off pre-season form, there haven't been many players that have performed better. And I've got Arias. I think a lot of the Wolves mids look interesting. Bellegarde, Menetzi, Arias, Hwang. But who is the one that is starting for them? Or who are the few that are starting from them? We know that Strand Larsen will play most games. Who are the midfielders in and around that play enough? Because they have enough options that they can rotate them in and out. I just think with Arias, he's got that star potential. He's got that Cunha-esque sort of fear about him. When he grabs the ball, you see defenders back off. He's got that little bit of that flair, I suppose. So he's the sort of player that you could imagine will drive that Wolves teams forward and will play a lot of minutes, but I just don't know enough about him and I need to see more from him in the Premier League. So yeah, in terms of midfielders then, below 10% that I think are worth looking at, I think the standout for me has to be Ismail Assar. Anderson will tick along, but he's just not that exciting. And then keep an eye out maybe for Cody Gakpo as well. But yeah, Ismail Assar, it's difficult to overlook that data. So, guys, moving on to the forwards, and I've had to obviously remove DEFCON potential because DEFCON doesn't really matter for forwards. I think, in fact, I'm sure FPL Focal tweeted, do you know what, we can even have a look at this. Sorry, I'm just keep on going back and forth between things. But forwards last season, looking at DEFCON, I'm sure Focal tweeted that, yeah, Bowen was the only forward to pick up any defensive contribution points. It's just towards the edge of your screen there with 6. So no other forwards would have picked up any defensive contribution points other than Jared Bowen, which is crazy, right? Obviously, he was a midfielder last season, but that means that you might get a couple from Jared Bowen this season if he continues at that rate. But what I'm essentially saying here, I suppose, is that these forwards aren't going to be picking up many defensive contribution points. So as a result, I've just replaced that with shots in the box per 90 for that little column there. So I've only got 7 on this list here. There are potentially a couple more, but I've got Welbeck, Mateta, Strand Larsen, Eva Nilsson, Jimenez, Fulkrug, and Thiago. If I were to remove Fulkrug from the equation for a second, I think what you'll notice about these forwards is that maybe the reason that they're so lowly owned is all of them pretty much have pretty difficult first fixtures. Maybe Welbeck against Fulham at home isn't bad, but Mateta against Chelsea away, Strand Larsen against Man City, even Nilsson against Liverpool. You could even argue to some extent, I don't know, Thiago against Nottingham Forest away isn't great, or even Raul Jimenez against Brighton. They've not got the best opening fixture, and that can be enough to put you off, especially if you're looking at a bench boost one. If I look at this list here, though, they've all got really good underlying data. So Welbeck, Mateta, Strand Larsen, Eva Nilsson, and Jimenez all sit between 0.35 and 0.45 non-penalty expected goals per 90. So they've all got very similar. They're basically going to accumulate 1 non-penalty XG every 3 games or so if they get good minutes. So these are forwards that will probably go out there and get you something like 12 goals. They might be able to push towards 15 or 20 if they have a really good season, based on what we saw last year. They're all taking about 1.7 to 2.5 shots in the box per 90, with Jimenez's being slightly higher. They've all got mixed bag opening fixtures. Like, these are all very similar assets in terms of what you would expect from them based on last season. But I think a couple of these I could see having really, really strong seasons ahead. And that the main two for me, really, is actually Eva Nilsson and Strand Larsen, who arguably have 2 of the most difficult opening games against City and Liverpool. But Strand Larsen, without Cunha in the team last season, actually did slightly better. There's a good chance he's on penalties now, again, without Cunha in the team. And I do rate Vitor Pereira. I'm not sure what sort of season Wolves will have, but I think now that Strand Larsen, by the way, is permanently signed, he was only on loan at the start of last season, but he's now permanently signed, I could see him having a really strong season. So I like Strand Larsen. And Eva Nilsson has the best goal threat here. I know he's a bit of a, I think it's disrespectful to say it's a bit of a Darwin Nunez, but he does spur a lot of chances. We've seen that in pre-season. He's already missed an open goal from about 3 yards out. He is a player that will frustrate, but he gets a large quantity of chances for Bournemouth. These minutes were really good. There's a chance he takes penalties, by the way, because Kluivert, I think, still hasn't been in the squad. And Kluivert doesn't always play 90, whereas Eva Nilsson's minutes are much better. So he is a bit of a penalty taker, just not obviously full first choice penalty taker at the moment. Takes a lot of shots in the box. I actually, if you can look past that first fixture for Bournemouth, I really like their opening fixtures. So I think overall for me, I am really looking at trying to not bench boost in one, almost solely for the purpose of getting a better third forward. Because if I bench boost in one, I'm looking at probably choosing someone like Fulkrug or Welbeck. And by the way, both could do really well, not only in Game Week 1, but beyond. Welbeck's minutes probably slightly more secure, but at the moment, Fulkrug's starting and looking decent, so they are okay options, and I'm considering it for sure. But if I bench boost in 2 or 3, I can get away with choosing Eva Nilsson or Strand Larsen and actually just putting them on my bench for Game Week 1. And then from Game Week 2, I have a forward coming in that I think is just a better option. So those are the 2 that I'm really eyeing up. But even someone like a Jean-Philippe Mateta, a little bit more expensive, of course, but he's going under the radar. Look at what he's done in pre-season. Look at what he's done at points across the last 2 seasons. The man is brilliant. Arguably underpriced when he's on his day. But I just think that maybe look at Ismail Assar and Munoz at 5.5 and 6.5, and you think there are cheaper routes into that Crystal Palace team. So, I don't know. I'm just looking at Eva Nilsson and Strand Larsen for me as the 2 that stand out. Thiago at 6 million is worth a shout if Johan Wissa does leave and join someone like Newcastle. I think that will depend on what happens with Sesko. If Man United get Sesko and Newcastle go for Wissa. But only yesterday, Brentford posted a picture of Wissa in training. So it might be a bit of mind games there. But unless we get confirmation that Wissa is leaving, I just wouldn't be able to go for Thiago. So yeah, I think there are lots of interesting forward options. But I would just toy with the idea of, can you get away with benching Strand Larsen or even Nilsson in Game Week 1 and then carrying them forward? Or, by the way, just playing them. If I told you Wolves score against City or Bournemouth score against Liverpool, you might be a little bit surprised, but it's football at the end of the day. And all you need is an assist or a goal in that first game. And then not only have you picked up points, but you've then also got a really good asset moving forward. So also don't be afraid to start the likes of Strand Larsen and even Nilsson. Let me know if there's anyone I've missed overall there. But yeah, to recap going through, I think Juve and Dorgu really high ceiling for defenders. I think a Forest defender and a Palace defender should be a consideration. In the midfield, there are tons of really good options. I would trust your gut feeling, but Ismail Assar stands out. And then for the forwards, I think Strand Larsen and even Nilsson. Something you will notice, though, about all of those players is they do have difficult fixtures in Game Week 1. So it's about weighing up the short and the long term. So guys, there you have it. Those are a few players that I like under 10% ownership. Again, don't choose them just for the low ownership, but I think they're at least worth considering. If you've enjoyed today's video, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. As I said throughout the video, do check out Fantasy Football Hub, especially if you want to get a little bit more into data, you want that DEFCON data, or you just want to get a free team rating as well. You can do so. Upload your team for free using the link down below. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.